Books I borrow. And books I borrow, I remind you that this is a series of videos. I very seldom shoot them, but anyway, where I talk about books I have just borrowed from the university library. And today there are two batches ready, one in French and one in English mostly. And I will begin with the one in English. But before saying that, I have to say that the fact that I am doing one of these videos today is, of course, because I am at the Site Tanner. I have just retrieved books I had ordered and also books I've picked up from the shelves at the university library of my university, Bibliothèque des Tanneurs, in Tours, France. But this is, in fact, a sequel, more or less, to a conversation I've had on YouTube yesterday because of one of Azélie Fayol's videos on the Un Grain de Lettres YouTube channel. And there was this whole debate about do you still borrow books from the university library if it's not for work? And the truth is that, in fact, it's very difficult for me to answer that question because what is something that I read for my work? And the answer was quite complex to give. But I think that today, with the books I have borrowed, I can try and distinguish between books I really borrow for my work and books that I borrow for myself. And this is already, and I don't really like putting it that way. Anyway, the books I'm borrowing in French are by authors that I have decided to discover or to look into more in detail. And one writer I really liked when I read something by her a few years ago is French-Canadian Gabrielle Roy, and I discovered her work thanks to François Bon, who talked about her quite a lot a few years ago, and I finally decided to read one of her collections, more or less. It was La Rivière Sans Repos, and this is a book I really loved, and I think I talked about La Rivière Sans Repos in one of the Je rends des livres videos. So here are these 4 books by Gabrielle Roy, Alexandre Chenevert, La Montagne Secrète, and this is something, and this is an author, and these are books that I discussed with Michel Jean as well on Twitter a few days ago. La Route d'Altamont and Rue Deschambault. And I can't really remember the ones that Michel Jean recommended most, but he said that Gabrielle Roy, was great and that basically I could read everything by her. This comes also from Twitter, and this comes from a discovery I made this morning, completely at random, or almost completely at random. I had never heard about Neil Dorff, who was a Belgian writer, and she was Dutch, in fact, but she wrote in French, and these 3 books are autobiography, and she wrote that in the very beginning of the 20th century. The first book she wrote was Jour de famine et de détresse, which was published in 1911, and it is an autobiography, and apparently it has been compared to Zola at the time, and she seems to be a tremendously interesting writer. And this morning on Twitter, I wrote a thread because I was really amazed that she is such a great writer, and outside Belgium, no one, or almost no one, seems to have heard about her. So yet you can read her in Babel and Labor. So these are collection de poche, paperbacks. So she's not that lesser known. I had never heard about her, but this just shows how uncultivated I am. Orphée Studio Poésie d'aujourd'hui à voix haute, and this is an anthology which was, and this is in NRF Poésie, and this is an anthology which was curated, so to speak, by André Velter 20 years ago. The reason why I picked that up is because I looked for books by Nabil Fares in the university library catalog, and my library doesn't have the book I wanted, which is one book which was in fact commented upon, mentioned by Ahmed Slama on his YouTube channel, And so I borrowed, basically, I ordered and picked up what was available. And this is the only book by Nabil Fares which was available. And there are a few poems by him as well in this anthology. And I noted that in this anthology, there are something like 30, 35 poets and only one woman, Michel Grangot. So, this is an issue that I've been raising repeatedly and more often in the past few weeks. And this is amazing. Like 20 years ago, you could, have that kind of anthology, and there's only one woman poet. But I'm not going into more details about that. So, La mort de Salabeille ou la vie obscure d'un Maghrébin by Nabil Fares. And Nabil Fares seems to be a very, very interesting writer, and I had never heard about him. And thanks to Ahmed Slama, I'll be able to have a look at one of his books. But this is not the book I wanted to read originally. The one I wanted to read was Yaya Pas de Chance, or L'exil et le désarroi, which is the book Ahmed talked about in his video. Okay, so these were the books in French, and it's a bit weird, of course, talking about books that have been written and published in French, and to be talking about that in France, borrowing them from a French university library and talking about them in English. But the reason is that, for whatever reason, this series of videos was started in English, and I've decided to stick to that original principle. But luckily enough, the other books are in English. And again, this is, is that for work or not? I don't know. The Cambridge Introduction to Literature and the Environment by Timothy Clark, and Witchcraft, the very short introduction, the Oxford Very Short Introduction to Witchcraft. This is, of course, to have a look at some of these books that we introduce to our students in first year, methodology, concept clé, and all these general culture classes and methodology classes that I teach in first year. So, of course, that's one of the reasons, but I've picked up the themes because, of course, of my research, because of my personal interests, but my personal interests and my research keep overlapping, so to speak, or clashing. So it's not really surprising. And these are really books I have borrowed for work, and there is a good reason for that. And I don't know if there are any of my third-year students who sometimes have a look at these videos. I don't think it is the case, because I would have many more views, in fact, and I think only a couple of them are, in fact, abonnés YouTube. But anyway, the reason why I'm saying this is because the books I'm going to talk about have been borrowed, because I am already, thinking about the exam topics for January for this L3 Traductologie class. And these are books that I borrow because possibly I will find an exam topic in these books. So you never know. And these are books I haven't read either. So I've picked up, because the idea is that at the university library, I can find books both in the original English version and in the French translation. It's very easy, and my students could do that as well. And this is something I've been encouraging them to do very regularly, like, pick up any random book, just read the first page and look at the first page in French, or translate one passage almost at random and then compare that with the official published translation. It's a very good exercise. Very few do it, but it's useful. So what have we got there then? Anne Enright, and she's a writer I've never read, The Gathering, and the French translation, Retrouvailles, traduit de l'anglais par Isabelle Reynarez, ou Reynarez, je ne sais pas comment il faut dire. And this is a book dating back to 2007, and the French translation was published in 2009. Another, and this is a writer I've never even heard about, Joe Dunthorne, is apparently a Welsh novelist writing in English. The Adulterants, and What struck me, of course, was the title and the cover, possibly, but really the title, The Adulterants, and also the name of the writer. I mean, who is it? Who is this? Okay, and The Adulterants, which has been translated into as Les Désaccordés. La traduction française est de Simon Baril chez Gallimard, and the translation was published in 2019, and the original is 2018. So this is a writer I've never heard about, so why not? And the other, or the last couple of books I borrowed, is the first volume of Quentin Bell's biography of Virginia Woolf. And I've never read this biography, but I very rarely read biographies, in fact. So I've borrowed both the original, the Quentin Bell's biography, and the translation, which is already quite old. It was published aux Éditions Stock in 1973. Okay, and that's... And they didn't choose the same picture for the cover. So I don't know which... This may be like the final poll, trying to prove that who has watched this video up until the end. I mean, which photograph of Virginia Woolf do you prefer? Do you prefer the one on the cover of the English edition or the one on the cover of the French edition?